Hello everyone, this is part 28 of What If Naruto Had a Proper Teacher, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
As soon as Asuma's team finished scaling the wall, they came under immediate attack. Sasori launched scores of poisoned senbon and Kidomaru immediately began firing arrows. The needles were blasted away by Asuma's futon, repusho, wind release, gale palm. However, the arrow fired by Kidomaru was not so easily deflected. It came screaming forward at vicious speed and Neji had to contort his body away from the arrow as it streaked past. Tenten tossed a few scrolls in the air that vomited out kunai and senbon at her opponents. Guren shielded herself with a wall of crystals. One of the Zetsu clones was nicked and Sasori's armored shell was too strong to be broken by something like flying metal. Neji shouted to his companions. There is a cloaked creature with an Akatsuki atop it and another inside its mouth. Sasori used the Kazekage puppet to fire Satatsu Shiga, iron sand drizzle. Asuma knew this was not like the earlier needle attack. This was a potent ranked jutsu that fired deadly projectiles nearly impossible to see let alone dodge. Asuma only had time to shout out a brief warning. Thankfully he had trained with Neji for some time and the two acted in concert with each other. Neji used Kaiten, which was a powerful enough defensive move to shield them from the attack. Not even Kidomaru's arrows could pierce the Hyuga's defense. Tenten and Asuma put themselves behind Neji and weathered the storm while Lee burst into the Simon, Gate of Life, and leapt away from the deadly magnetically propelled projectiles. Pain was not idle and had just finished summoning a giant panda who roared and charged on all fours toward the Konoha shinobi. Guren attempted to trap the speedy green blur in a crystal, but her jutsu took too long to form and was unable to match his speed. When the iron projectiles ceased their assault, Asuma dashed out from behind Neji and used futon, Uchakubi Ritapu, wind release, wind decapitation. The razor-sharp blade of air was aimed straight for Sasori. The attack could rip through his puppet armor and years of experience told Sasori as much. In an instant he had reformed the iron sand into a shield that blocked the Sarutobi's attack. Tenten meanwhile unsealed a javelin and threw it at Kidomaru, who dodged away from the projectile only for it to explode out in all directions thanks to high-level Fuinjutsu explosive seals. Within those seals were also bits of burning shrapnel that ripped into Kidomaru despite the tougher skin he had due to the cursed seal. He swore and cradled one of his wounded limbs and stepped away from the fight. The panda that had been summoned charged straight forward and met its match in Konoha's taijutsu master. His already incredible speed and strength was further enhanced by the Hachiman, allowing him to more than quintuple his already overpowering strength. His kick slammed into the panda and obliterated the creature in one blow. Neji made a beeline for the two Akatsuki who were attempting to hide. One of the Zetsu clones delayed him for a few seconds before being pasted by his intense taijutsu barrage. However, that did leave time for Sasori to complete his Satatsu Kaiho, Sand Iron, World Method. Iron branch spikes split and multiplied in all directions. Everyone on the field could see the poison dripping from the iron and knew to avoid it at any cost. Neji once more relied on Kaiten to drive the iron away. In a circle around him the iron scratched and plunged at him but was unable to pierce his formidable defense. Asuma had to dance one way and then the other, using his futon-enhanced kunai to slash apart branches that couldn't be avoided. Tenten used Kawarimi to distance herself to the edge of the building as far away as possible. Lee dived in through the deadly iron maze and with his speed managed to outrun it and then close in on Sasori. Meanwhile, Guren had to put up a wall of crystal to stop Sasori's attacks from killing her. She knew she had been a favorite of Orochimaru and at one point had been a candidate as a host body. But the speed and power that was being displayed here showed her why the Snake Sannin had hesitated. It was unsettling to realize how out of her league she was. Sasori fired more senbon out of his puppet's mouth at Lee, who evaded them with contemptuous ease. His speed prior to using the gates was at Sasuke's level, which meant that while using the gates he was nearly untouchable by any sort of projectile. Sasori brought his massive tail around to guard against Lee's sudden assault, but that too was avoided. Lee let loose with a crushing punch to the center of his puppet and his Hiriko puppet was shattered to pieces. Sasori's puppet body sailed away from his lost puppet and allowed himself to land in the middle of the iron branches which would prevent his green-clad foe from pursuing. He had to step quickly though as Asuma fired one of his chakra-channeling kunai, and it took all of the S-class shinobi's reflexes to dodge while simultaneously manipulating the chakra strings to use Satetsu Keshu, iron sand, gathering assault, to form a massive hammer of iron sand in an attempt to crush the Hyuga. Neji was surrounded by iron branches dripping with poison and had little choice but to use Kaiten again. His constant use of the powerful defensive technique was swiftly draining his chakra reserves. The hammer of iron sand was rebuffed and flew away only to reform and strike down again. Guren rose up to the top of the crystal wall she had formed and launched dozens of crystal shuriken at her foes. Lee was distressed to see his friend and rival trapped by the puppet's attack but was at a brief loss as to what to do. While he thought he dodged the crystal projectiles, a new monster made its appearance as the animal path summoned a gigantic ox. Lee grinned at the sudden solution to his problems and opened up Shaman, Gate of Pain. He allowed the ox to charge and then blitzed to the side and struck it with a spinning back kick that had enough force to smash the Hokage monument. His blow slammed the ox directly toward the puppet master. The sheer mass of the beast smashed through the iron spike forest that had been created and Sasori had to quickly dodge out of the way. However, now he was in the open. Tenten, seeing what was happening, fired another one of her explosive javelins, not at Sasori but where Sasori would be landing. The human puppet cocooned himself with the iron sand of the Kazekage puppet right as the javelin exploded. The puppet was jostled significantly but the barrier protected him from what could have been a lethal blow. The puppet was sturdier than a human but those exploding javelins packed a punch. Asuma cut through the maze of iron and went at Sasori with a vengeance. His perfectly honed body dodged the dangerous abilities of the Kazekage puppet while his chakra blades sliced through chakra strings. He couldn't see the strings but he could figure out by deduction how they were attached. Sasori had to quickly create new strings and reattach them before having his best puppet cut off from him. The Byakugan allowed Neji to see the giant snake-tailed chameleon. He raced toward the opponents in Akatsuki robes who were summoning the massive, if ineffective, gigantic animals. The chameleon walked along the wall further upward while Neji pursued. Sasori looked at the battlefield in disgust. His allies were doing little and he had to deal with Sarutobi and the green-clad taijutsu master. It was time for his ultimate technique. Akahigi, Hayaki no Soen, Red Secret Technique, performance of 100 puppets. Sasori resealed his favorite puppet and then unleashed at one time the 100 puppets. Unlike other puppet users who could typically control 2 or 3, he could fight with 100 at the same time. His artificial fingers danced as he sent the puppets charging at 3 of his opponents. He would allow leader Sama to deal with the one pursuer. Nagato was viewing the battle from the multiple paths. Right as Neji was assaulting the 2 most critical paths of pain, the others were being defeated by Hitaki's team. As Neji drew close, the animal path summoned the body of the Deva path, the body Yahiko. The chameleon suddenly reversed directions and took a flying leap off the vertical incline it had been scaling and back down to the battlefield. Neji cursed his lack of ranged techniques and raced back down, still shadowing his prey. He shouted out a warning of the oncoming invisible danger. He looked below and saw dozens of puppets being mauled to pieces by his comrades. While Sasori was an unrivaled genius at puppetry, his opponents were geniuses of their own. Lee could dance around the puppets even without the Hachiman, but with it they were blown apart by his rapid delivery of forceful punches that could shatter rock. Asuma's trench knives cut through strings, wooden weapons with equal ease. The descent time gave the Naraka path enough time to summon the King of Hell and revive the Asura path. The chameleon landed and Neji narrowed his eyes as he saw the additional opponent emerge out of the chakra construct before him. He saw the chakra gather in the new arrival's palms and was shocked at its potency. Realizing time was of the essence, Neji quickly used Kaiten as the Asura path used Shinra Tensei, Almighty Push. Kaiten may have been the ultimate defense of the Hyuga, but against the power of the Rinnegan it was swept away. The blast wave struck Neji in rotation and collapsed his jutsu with concussive force. It lessened the blow, but the collision of the 2 forces ripped apart the Fuinjutsu protections and snapped Neji's left arm. The unspent force continued to drive Neji back and off of the building. It drove him back 100 meters and slammed him through the side of another building. Tenten screamed as she saw Neji blown back by the vicious power of Shinra Tensei, Almighty Push. She threw a kunai wrapped in ninja wire and watched as it slammed into the building. She tested the weight briefly and then swung across the gap between the buildings and rushed over to Neji's unmoving form. Break. Team 7 ran on at top speed. Naruto guided them around the paper bomb traps that littered the area as they grew closer to the center of a megacore. Naruto strained his senjutsu senses as far as he could to try to somewhat monitor the battle. His concern spiked when he felt the revival of the one who could fire off jutsu more powerful than Futon, Sora Tonkachi, Wind Release, Sky Hammer. We have to hurry, he admonished his team. Kakashi signaled him to go on ahead. He didn't like splitting the group, but no one of them could rival Naruto's speed when he was in Sage mode. The ground blew apart as Naruto deliberately smashed chakra into his feet, giving his team a safe path around traps to follow. The Sharingan could do the same, but it was a drain on chakra while it would only shave maybe a second off of Naruto's Sage time to crater the ground around him. Hold on guys. Break. Lee redoubled his efforts to slaughter the puppets in his way when he saw Neji go flying. His strikes blew them apart as he rushed toward the unyouthful opponent who may have just killed his friend. Asuma hissed in frustration as he saw half of his team taken out of the fight. He couldn't blame the girl, it was obvious she had feelings for the Hyuga. If it was Kurenai who may be dead, he would have done the same thing. The animal path summoned the Asura path and repeated the process that was done with the Deva path. The green-clad Hachiman-enhanced opponent blazed forward and the Deva path moved to intercept. Nagato had not anticipated this opponent to be so difficult. He had the power of a god and he continued to fight foe after foe that could match or beat him. His opponent's speed outmatched his currently, and only the powerful body of Yahiko enhanced with the Rinnegan kept him from being defeated. He matched blow for blow against the green beast, who went through a repertoire of taijutsu moves that left Nagato dazed. Every move was perfect and every move had the potential to be deadly as he dodged and countered blows by a hair's breadth. Even pushing out a pair of chakra rods did nothing to even the fight. Lee saw another Akatsuki member summoned and revived and knew he had to move quickly to defeat his foe. Already pushing near his limit, he gave a mighty cry and opened Tommen, Gate of Limit. The additional speed and power now had Nagato completely on the defensive. He knew that he wouldn't have time to use Shinra Tensei, Almighty Push. So instead he used his power to pull Lee off balance. Lee was swept off his feet and hurtled toward the jagged chakra rod aimed at his chest. Guy's protege delivered a perfect rising block that shoved the chakra rod out of the way. With a mid-air twist he sent a spinning reverse kick that Pain's arm was able to block, but only at the cost of it shattering. Nagato's gambit failed, but already the Asura path was firing a slew of missiles at Lee. Lee at this point was off balance and still flying forward from the Rinnegan's initial pull. The missiles impacted him, but the Fuinjutsu suit prevented them from doing any significant damage. However, several of the seals sizzled away from absorbing the blows. As Lee recovered and charged back toward the paths of pain, the human path was being revived as well. Lee knew he couldn't keep up the Hachiman indefinitely, and the odds continued to grow worse and worse. Asuma was thoroughly impressed with Lee's power. He was one of the fastest shinobi alive before using the 8 gates, and after he used it, well, he knew he would be toast if Lee ever went after him with the gates open. Right now though, they were dealing with a foe who continued to bring more reinforcements back to life, and that needed to be finished. However, in between him and those strange Akatsuki there were the remnants of Sasori's puppet army. There were only about a dozen left, but now they moved more swiftly as their limbs were pushed and pulled faster than muscle would allow, as the puppet master had fewer puppets to split his attention on. Asuma was nearly cut by a sickle. His suit would probably protect him from one blow, but if he was scratched he was done for. Sasori was known for his highly lethal poison. He spun away from another puppet and lashed out with trench knives, snapping chakra threads and driving back the agile puppets. He drove onward towards Sasori himself. The weakness of a puppet master was their vulnerability to close combat. He poured on the speed as he dodged and slashed inexorably onward. Soon enough he was on top of the Akatsuki. The man who had made himself into a puppet was not like others who chose that shinobi path. His body was equipped with blades and they slashed at Asuma as his puppets descended into a tight ring around the bearded shinobi. Asuma grinned as blades attacked from all sides. Futon, Tatsumaki Supin, Wind Release, Tornado Spin. Naruto wasn't the only one who had created a new wind-powered jutsu. Unlike Futon, Repusho, wind release, Gale Palm, which sent wind flying in all directions, his new jutsu sent miniature tornadoes in a 360-degree arc. In all directions, tiny blasts of air swirled and struck with slashing force. It was a purely short-range jutsu as it only extended 10 feet before the hyper-dense chakra petered out, but in this situation it was all that was needed. The razor-sharp tornadoes cut through the puppets like a scythe through wheat. More important in Asuma's eyes was that they cut into Sasori as well. The ex-Suna shinobi had thought he was leading Asuma into a trap, but in reality it was Sarutobi's trap. Sasori's body was shorn into pieces as the cutting wind sliced through his body and into the heart that powered his essence. Asuma fell to one knee after using so much chakra. It was a technique that would probably be better suited for someone like Naruto, but it had done the trick. Break. Conan had watched the battle from a nearby building, Nagato having ordered her away. The only reason she had acquiesced was because Nagato was still within the barrier Sasori had erected. The Angel of Omegakure was concerned as the battle continued. Guren and Kidomaru were out of their league in a battle such as this. The Zetsu clones had barely slowed the Hyuga. Sasori was showing the difference in caliber between an A-ranked shinobi and an S-ranked one. She took no joy in seeing the Konoha shinobi being hurled back by Shinra Tensei, almighty push. Seeing the Kunoichi run after him reminded her of what had happened to brave Yahiko. It was with great melancholy that she rose up on her paper wings to ensure the girl and the Hyuga would not return to the fight. Break. Lee could not afford to wait any longer. Even with the massive boost in speed and power, he wasn't able to get through to attack the nearly invisible user of this strange reanimation jutsu. His body was shaking with the strain of the Hachiman and he was going to take it one step further. He tapped into his inner reserves and unlocked the gate at his stomach. Kaiman, Gate of Joy, provided a massive boost of power to the green-clad shinobi. The Fuinjutsu seals shone brightly and then dissipated from the massive power surge from the inside out. The rubble around Lee was pushed back by the radiating waves of power. He sprang forward as Nagato tried to use Shinra Tensei, almighty push. Such was Lee's speed that he was behind Nagato before the massive chakra wave could be fired. Lee stiffened his fingers and jabbed them straight into Pain's back. Pain had Rinnegan-blessed reflexes that allowed him to partially turn away from the blow as it struck. But that only meant that instead of Lee's fingers bursting through his chest cavity, his strike turned his shoulder to paste. The other paths of Pain converged on Lee and he demolished the mechanical Pain in less than a second. The human path lasted on a little longer as the taijutsu mastered shattered ribs with a kick, and before the path could travel more than a foot took an elbow across the side of the face. Body moving one direction and head going toward the other meant a snapped neck. Lee darted forward, striking to where he thought the chameleon was. He was correct and his punch pulped the creature's face. However, the two paths of Pain had seen the likely attack coming and were already using Kawarimi to the maximum range they could. Lee spent a few precious seconds attempting to locate the two. He spotted them higher up on the building, nearing the very top of it. Lee's feet moved like lightning as the walls of the tall building crumbled beneath him. He was far, far faster than his opponents. It would only take another second to overtake the two fleeing Akatsuki when part of the building broke off, taking him with it. Only he wasn't falling down, he was falling horizontally with parts of the building. He looked down and saw the one who sent Neji through a building holding his hand up. Lee had no idea how to fight this ability. He simply couldn't push off of anything in the middle of the air. And then the rocks and debris came from all directions. Lee was a whirlwind of punches and kicks, smashing away the projectiles, but they continued to clump around him. Despite his superhuman efforts, some got through and crashed into him, further impeding his movements. Hundreds of pounds of rock, pipe, rubble and iron and slammed into him, covering him completely. Nagato rasped, "I've had enough of you." He balled his hands into a fist as more and more parts of the building flew up, creating a larger and larger ball of debris. There wasn't a single piece of green showing when he was finished. Asuma had just finished Sasori when he saw Lee's peril. His own reserves low, he tossed one of his prized trench knives at the Akatsuki with a generous helping of wind-natured chakra. Even though he was looking up at Lee, he somehow saw the blade racing toward him and deflected it away. The momentary lapse in concentration was enough for Nagato to lose control. He had pushed his immense chakra reserves further than he had in over a decade. The repeated use of Shinra Tensei, almighty push, the summoning, the resurrections and the fighting had taken its toll. The rocks broke apart and a bloodied, battered and gasping Lee pushed off one of the rocks and landed on the landing next to Asuma. Lee grit his teeth with determination but felt his body fail out from under him. The power of the Hachiman faded and the massive muscle tearing combined with the broken bones and bruised flesh from Pain's latest attack left him with nothing. He collapsed, conscious but useless, to the ground. Break. Tenten wasn't a medical nin but she knew basic first aid. Neji was unconscious and a quick examination showed a multitude of cuts and a damaged spine. Oh Neji. Wounds to the spine were difficult to heal even for medical nin like Tsunade or Hana. She wasn't sure what to do. Moving him would be dangerous and it would also take her away from the fight. She didn't want to abandon Lee either. She didn't have to make the painful choice as she saw an Akatsuki come flying in on wings made of paper. Conan looked down at her. I see the look in your eyes. I am sorry. Her wings of paper flexed and then dozens of small sheets of paper with a razor edge were sent flying toward the downed Hyuga. Tenten reacted instantly and used her Fuinjutsu suit seals to hurl a swarm of weapons to intercept the thin projectiles. After taking care of those projectiles she opened a kunai scroll and 2 score of the weapons flashed through the air. Conan dodged to the side and created a pair of Kami Bunshin paper clone. 2 of them swooped down at Tenten while the real one observed and summoned more paper to her side. Tenten unsealed a Yari and stabbed out at the descending clones. To her surprise her spear met little resistance as it punctured the chest of her first target. Her eyes widened in realization, the clone wasn't just made of paper, it was made of paper bombs. The explosion blasted her back into the side of the building. She coughed up blood and quickly performed a kawarimi to the opposite side of the room as more of the paper bombs detonated the spot she had just vacated. The Konoha shinobi gasped in horror as Neji's body flopped over from the explosion. She raced to his side and used one of the techniques she had learned from Sakura. Kekai, Yonko Artery, Barrier Art, 4 parts. The Fuinjutsu barrier surrounded her and Neji. Conan began sending small waves of paper bombs to detonate against the barrier. Impressive, but it will not last long. Tenten knew that to be true. While the barrier was solid it couldn't withstand continuous explosions for more than a few minutes. She couldn't kawarimi out of the barrier. She took stock of her resources. Her suit had allowed her to weather the explosion. She had some minor burns on her abdomen that weren't dangerous. Most of the rest of the Fuinjutsu seals had been burned off. She had several scrolls full of weaponry, a few of gas and a specialized kunai scroll with 40 explosive tags. As the paper bombs continued to explode against the barrier, Tenten desperately thought about how she could get out of the situation with Neji intact. Fighting down a wave of hopelessness, she considered every option to her. The difficulty lay in keeping Neji safe while she fought the strange Akatsuki with paper wings. Conan's amber eyes betrayed no emotion as the explosions tore down the defensive barrier. She knew the horror of war. Scenes like this should not exist, but they would continue to exist unless Nagato's dream was made a reality. Naruto neared the fighting. He could clearly sense the fight had split into 2 separate areas. Asuma and Lee were facing off against most of them while Neji and Tenten were against one in a building over. With his enhanced senses he realized both pairs were in serious trouble. He couldn't form clones in Senjutsu mode, which meant he couldn't save both pairs. That was intolerable for him, and as he drew with insight he released the natural energy. Now he could create scores of Kage Bunshin and he did so with great relish. Half of the mob went toward Tenten and Neji while the other half went towards Asuma and Lee. Conan's rain of explosions was interrupted by blast after blast of wind. The clones pushed the paper bombs, paper clones and Conan herself back. Conan flared her wings but she couldn't stay stable against the force of repeated futon, daytopper, wind release, great breakthrough, waves. She was blown clear of the building and did not return. Tenten saw Naruto arrive and took down her Fuinjutsu barrier. The real Naruto looked down and saw Neji in bad shape. He needs to get to Tsunade fast. Tenten could only nod. Naruto pulled on the toxic chakra of the 9-tailed fox. Before disappearing in an orange flash he slapped a symbol onto the ground. His technique was highly chakra intensive and it took a couple of seconds to flip through the necessary hand seals, however once complete he reappeared at base camp with Neji. Tsunade, he has spinal damage and needs your help now. Iruka jerked in surprise at seeing Naruto there. He wasn't there long before Naruto disappeared in an orange blur again. While the original was seeking medical aid for his comrade, dozens of clones jumped in front of Asuma and Lee. Lee was in bad shape and Asuma was nearly out of chakra. Pain wasn't faring much better, but without Sage Mode it would be difficult for Naruto to finish him. Luckily the Akatsuki leader was in the mood to talk. Why do you fight so hard, Namikaze? You cannot win, you are merely delaying the inevitable. One of the Naruto clones stepped forward. I am fighting for my village and my comrades. Your organization attacked us first and you want to kill me personally and take the fox. Of course we would fight you. Pain looked at the young warrior and shook his head. This world has suffered long enough. I will bring an end to the pain of war. The clone laughed. Really, you seem to have done a wonderful job so far. Do not mock what you cannot understand. The shinobi lifestyle requires war. Thousands are orphaned and starve. You would prop up this flawed system in perpetuity. The clone shrugged. You've not convinced me that's what you're even trying to accomplish. And even if you could convince me, it doesn't matter. Pain narrowed his eyes. It doesn't matter. Of course not. I serve my village and the Hokage. You should have tried to convince Jiraiya-sama instead of murdering Konoha shinobi. Just like Iwa and eventually Kumo, you'll regret crossing paths with us. We don't like war, but we won't sit idly by while you attack us. And so the cycle of hatred continues. Asuma jumped in. You're damned right it does. Your people killed Kurenai and I'll never forgive you for it. Sacrifices must be made. This is bigger than petty grudges and lost comrades. Naruto was quite tempted to go after him right then and there. Holding back provided a tactical advantage, however, and that meant he would quite happily stall the Akatsuki. It isn't a petty grudge to Asuma. He lost the love of his life and that doesn't bother you. Pain slashed his arm through the air. You are short-sighted. Do you think I have never lost anyone? But I will make it so the deaths were not in vain. I will end the shinobi way of life and bring lasting peace. The clone shook his head. How? Gathering all of the tailed beasts will make you powerful but not invincible. As the two sides continued to argue their perspective, both refused to make the first move. It didn't provide a benefit to Konoha since Team 7 operated best when they were united. And it didn't benefit Nagato because he had realized his limitations. Nagato looked at Madara. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this. He didn't trust anyone else to see his long labors to fruition, but he didn't have a choice. With Sasori dead, his barrier would soon fall. His massive reserves were almost fully depleted through the efforts of repeated summoning, fighting and reviving the fallen paths. I will attempt to revive your true body. It will be my final act in this war. Obito would see the resurrection of the man who had put him on this path. The man who had saved his life all of those years ago. It wasn't a reunion he was looking forward to. He didn't fully trust the ancient Uchiha. At this point though, he didn't know what else to do. Kakashi's team was just so monstrous. Even the Rinnegan had not been enough to stop the S-class team. Good. I look forward to greeting my true self. He had lied to Nagato for years. It had been necessary. He had to both be Madara and not be Madara for this step of the plan to work. Obito had settled on the idea that he was a part of Madara's will made flesh but lacking in true power. The tortured soul had believed him fully, and there was no reason to muddy the waters and bring in doubt at this critical juncture. It was time to bring back to life one of the most powerful shinobi of all time. Power flared and Nagato felt every cell in his body strain under the pressure of bringing back a legend. It would cost him his life, but if it meant furthering Yahiko's dream of peace, it would be worth it. Kankuro had continued with his plan of running toward the least likely location a fleeing shinobi would go. Instead of attempting to leave the city, he had gone deeper into it. He was going to cross through the center of the city. It was possible that the Am shinobi might still be holding onto it. His eyes bulged when he saw in the distance what was going on. Explosions riddled the area. He saw the legendary Satetsu, Iron Sand, of a long-dead Kazekage be unleashed. He felt the pressure of someone unleashing the Hachiman and the arrival of hundreds of Naruto clones. Stupid, 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 stupid. I have to get out of here. He did not want to be anywhere near any Konoha shinobi, let alone their most lethal weapons. Going back seemed insane, but pressing forward meant risking running into one of those clones. Now they are just standing around talking. Fight, you bastards, or I can get the hell out of here. Break. Night was falling and Konoha had already sent out a dozen squads racing toward the capital of Hai no Kuni. Fuyu's plan was working as intended. She had split the remaining members of the Kinkaku force into 3 teams. One would go after the Hokage. That one was probably least likely to succeed since the Toad Sage was formidable and would have the elite Anbu around him. The second target was the Nara clan head. He was the strategic mastermind that had thwarted so many of their plans. And finally the last target was Danzo. Somehow the old man had beaten nearly impossible odds in the defense of the capital. The death of over 1,000 Kumo shinobi was on his hands and she wished the team every success. Fuyu was alone in her part. Despite being the leader and arguably one of the deadliest on the team, her sole role was to create a distraction. Her distraction would be the murder of Anko Mitarashi. The snake mistress of Konoha wouldn't go down quietly. She may even summon a few of her massive snakes. Fuyu was counting on it. Nothing in her own arsenal would make a commotion like a giant snake being summoned in the middle of the village. But snake or no, Fuyu would kill her. She would avenge her brother's shame and torture. Learning that Mitarashi was pregnant had not deterred her in the slightest. No, in fact it pleased her. She hoped that it made death all the more fearful for the bitch. The assassin carefully slipped closer to Anko's place of residence. There were seals on the walls of the home, but that wasn't unsuspected. Haruno had been a busy girl and had hardened the village's defenses quite considerably with her new Fuinjutsu seals. Those seals would keep a home safe from direct elemental jutsu, but not from someone with Fuyu's skills. She quivered with anticipation. It took an effort to dull the shaking. Tonight would be the culmination of her life's work for the village. The possibility of escaping after the attack would be non-existent. Fuyu didn't fear death, though she did not embrace it. As she picked the lock on the door and ghosted into her prey's home, she drew her blades. It was time. Break. Kakashi had nearly reached his destination. The sounds of fighting had dimmed. He doubted Naruto was in trouble, but nonetheless he revealed his Sharingan eye. Sure enough, he was able to see vast number of chakra signatures that were Naruto's clones. Good. Naruto managed to stall the enemy. Kakashi led the formation with Sasuke and Sakura behind him. They were halfway up the building when chakra flared powerfully from inside the tower and its flash partially occluded his eye. Hatake could sense something monumental had happened and rushed on. He came up to where the clones were standing around looking at the now unmoving Akatsuki. 2 had fled the scene completely, but the 6 with the chakra rods were now completely unmoving. Some of the clones had stabbed into them with their blades to ensure they were in fact dead. What happened? I don't know, sensei. 1 second they were talking about war and peace and the next they all dropped down. Gurren of the Shoten, Crystal Release, fled along with the archer as soon as it happened. I have a few clones chasing, but they are probably capable enough to survive. Naruto responded, clearly looking troubled. Kakashi scanned the area, as did Sasuke. It was easy to spot the Gofu Kekai 5 seal barrier. Before Kakashi could ask, Sakura spoke up. I can have it down in 5 minutes. Do you think something happened inside? That was a very good question. Their formidable opponent had weathered quite a bit. Did some hidden enemy decide to strike the Akatsuki while they were distracted by Naruto? Breaking an advanced seal barrier wasn't impossible, but sneaking through one. Only something like the Hiraishin would sweep through a barrier and get to the other side without tearing it apart first. Be careful but get started, Kakashi ordered. He looked over to Asuma and Lee. Asuma could still fight, but he didn't have much chakra left. Lee was definitely out. Asuma, take Lee and a couple of Kage Bunshin and head back to Tsunade. But I can still. One look at Kakashi silenced his protest. The man's word was absolute on the battlefield. Asuma grumbled but hauled Lee over his shoulder and nodded his head as he went back toward the edge of a Megakure. Kakashi turned to address the Naruto clone army, but they grinned. Already on it, boss is gathering natural chakra. Everything was set to go. By the time Sakura got the barrier down, Naruto would be in Sage mode. Whatever was behind the barrier was likely the mastermind behind the Akatsuki. Kakashi made a couple of Mizu Bunshin, water clone, and made ready for whatever they would find. A tense couple of minutes passed as they waited for their Fuinjutsu specialist to use the counter formula for the barrier. However, it proved to be unnecessary as the seal vanished on its own. The vast dispersal of the chakra holding it together made air crackle and the tower shuddered. A figure emerged from the now quivering tower. Kakashi actually blinked and flushed his chakra just in case he had somehow been trapped in a genjutsu. It was unlikely with his Sharingan and near-perfect level of chakra control for him to be caught unawares, but what he was seeing was even less likely. The figure was the spitting image of Madara Uchiha. He knew it was not an illusion, but there he was. The man's statue oversaw the Valley of the End and the stone carver had captured his likeness perfectly. The only difference was instead of a Sharingan, he held the Rinnegan. Behind Madara was an Akatsuki with an orange mask and a black version of the white clones they had been fighting, but they seemed inconsequential compared to the leading figure. Madara Uchiha, the man who helped found Konohagakure. The legend who was only surpassed by the Shodai himself. Kakashi hesitated, but only for an instant. His Mizubunshin launched a direct attack while he used Suten, Suiruden no Jutsu, Water Release, Water Dragon Jutsu. He had no expectation of winning the battle this way, but thanks to the constant rain, the normally heavily taxing jutsu wouldn't cost much. He had no doubts that it would take all of them to deal with the legendary shinobi. This troubled him as the nine-tailed fox's chakra flared wildly and out of control, disrupting Naruto's absorption of natural chakra. Sakura danced away from the opening and threw one of her specialized kunai. This had acid sealed inside that was particularly nasty to deal with. Sasuke added to the fray with Chidori Senbon. Madara laughed as he whirled into action. Break. Obito watched in awe as Madara was called forth from death. The tremendous chakra required rattled the tower and the intensity put his teeth on edge. But when it was done, when the Rinnegan eyes glazed over in death, Madara stepped forward. Gone was the old man who was barely keeping himself alive. This was Madara in his prime. He cracked his neck and tested his limbs. Have the biju been sealed? Obito shook his head. No, Madara-sama, we ran into some difficulties. Konoha killed the five-tailed beast and we have been unable to capture the nine tails. Madara grinned. Was QB too difficult for you? No matter, that one will be easy to bend. The Uchiha legend walked over to the corpse of Nagato and calmly removed his eye and inserted it into his own empty socket. Obito spoke up as Madara took the second eye. Wouldn't it be better if I took one of the eyes? No. The younger Uchiha was on uncertain ground. His elder had needed him when he was dying of old age. Now, he was expendable. You should know, Madara-sama, that we are under attack. Outside of the barrier seal is the container for the nine tails as well as his formidable team. Wry amusement colored Madara's voice. Formidable team. As I grew old, I saw each generation become weaker than the last. I will see how dangerous this formidable team is. Obito shook his head. Nagato wielded the Rinnegan and he couldn't defeat them. Everyone who has underestimated them has been torn apart. Madara snorted. You saw me when I was weak and decrepit. Come and witness what true power is. Break. Konan felt the tower tremble and knew it could only mean one thing. Nagato had summoned Madara. She knew deep within her heart that it had cost him his life. She gave a cry of despair and winged away. Everyone she had cared about had been taken from her. Madara and the other Akatsuki lackeys held no bond of friendship with her. If it had not been for Nagato's dream, she would never have done the things she had done. She was not alone in leaving the area. Both Guren and Kidomaru knew that they were outmatched by Konoha's notorious Team 7. As freshly minted Akatsuki, they had not been privy to much information outside of what they had overhead. Both decided that now would be a good time to vacate the area as well. Nothing was left of the original Akatsuki. Nothing was left at all of the organization save for that man who had authored its manipulation and his two servants. Break. Kurama hated the village that had imprisoned him and he hated the container he was forced to reside in. More than anything else, he despised being a tool for other people. Naruto used him as a tool, and what was galling to his pride was that he wasn't even the preferred tool for the brat. His unworthy host had to be dragged into learning how to control his chakra by his instructors. It wasn't that he wanted the boy to use more of his chakra. It was just that he couldn't stand not being considered the most powerful option available. When the boy did channel his chakra, he never made it easy. The shinobi had to fight against his own will each and every time as he channeled his hate and rage at his circumstance into the boy's chakra network. Bit by bit though, Naruto was able to resist the corrosive influences on his psyche. Kurama wasn't sure what disgusted him more, that he was still not considered the boy's chief weapon or that he was growing ever more proficient at drawing on his chakra. But as much as he hated the boy, hated the first Hokage, hated his other hosts and Namikas, those all paled compared to the ultimate violation. Because even when his chakra was forcibly taken from him, even when he was trapped in a fetid sewer or spiked to a rock, his mind was free. It was free to think, to plot, to hate and to reminisce. One man had stolen that free will, one had broken his mind under those abominable eyes. Madara Uchiha. That was the one entity Kurama hated above all others. And now that foul presence had returned, Kurama saw red and flared his power. He would break free of this useless container and rip the bastard to shreds. His bulk slammed into the cage holding his hated seal. It held, but he would not give up so easily. He flooded his host with his chakra and crashed into the cage again. He had to get out. He had to break through the seal or he would be enslaved mind, body and soul again. It cannot happen again. Kurama's rage and terror redoubled as his host fought against the rising tide of demonic chakra. Madara laughed at the pathetic assault on his person. Using his gunbai he deflected the Chidori Senbon and redirected them toward the kunoiki. Normally one couldn't use a fan in this fashion, but a small pulse of futon chakra allowed him to reflect attacks using the gunbai. His Sharingan picked up the Fuinjutsu formula written on the kunai and he had skillfully directed one of the small bits of Raiten from the Chidori Senbon to it. The Raiten chakra blew the seal and the kunai evaporated as gallons of acid sprayed in all directions. The legendary Uchiha was actually suitably impressed. It made sense that the shinobi world would make some advances since his era. Weak shinobi have to adapt or die. The Suiten, Suiruden no Jutsu, water release, water dragon jutsu, was a bit more of a threat. It was not something he could redirect with his gunbai. He could move out of the way, use Kawarimi, use Shinra Tensei, Almighty Push, the same jutsu sent back, a mud wall and hundreds of other counters. He decided to go with what he thought would be the most insulting. Kaiten was naturally countered by Suiten. Madara used a one-handed seal and used the Uchiha staple Kaiten. Kaiten, Gokakyu no Jutsu, fire release, great fireball technique, normally would have done nothing to stop a powerful Suiten jutsu, but Madara modified the attack on the fly to make the flames burn far hotter and more powerfully. The flames disintegrated the water dragon and sent steam billowing out in all directions. Madara saw the non-Uchiha wielder of the Sharingan already bringing out his next jutsu. Madara was mildly impressed with the Raiten jutsu he witnessed. It was condensed in an incredibly small area, it practically thrummed with power. That jutsu could pierce nearly anything. This might be interesting after all. The shinobi coming at him was fast, but it was laughably slower than what was needed to lay a finger on him. When he was 2 steps away from him he saw chakra flare within the spine of the Raiten user. The ancient shinobi realized in an instant that his opponent was using Hachiman. A wave of chakra flashed out of him as Shaman, Gate of Pain, was activated. Madara had become well versed in all sorts of jutsu during his long life. His appreciation for his opponent's skills went up a notch as he was able to maintain the powerful Raiten jutsu despite the wave of chakra propelling his strength and speed into greater heights. Those last 2 steps were finished in a fraction of a second and the chirping jutsu sailed toward his heart. Madara was forced to twist his shoulder and move away from the direction of the attack in order for the strike to miss him. He had actually been caught by surprise at the move, but thanks to the Sharingan and the increased cognitive power it gave him, his surprise only lasted a few hundredths of a second. Had I been a lesser shinobi, that would have ended the fight. I can see Obito's concern. But it is still nothing compared to my power. As Kakashi missed striking with his Reikiri by inches, his Fuinjutsu suit flared chakra. Madara could see the seals being released in an instant and saw kunai being blasted toward him at point-blank range with speed and power that far surpassed what most shinobi were capable of. They were being unsealed and pushed forward from the Fuinjutsu seals on the man's arm and shoulder. Despite Madara's speed and skill, there was no way to stop a kunai traveling that fast from spanning the distance of inches. I will not allow these dogs to claim first blood. He had intended to toy with the rats a while longer before he used this. In an instant chakra flared blue around him as his Susanoo coated and stopped the kunai cold. The sudden expansion of chakra pushed his opponent away from him. His perfect Susanoo made him practically invincible. He planned it from the start. His angle of attack, the sudden unexpected increase of speed, forcing me to dodge a certain way to line up the propelled kunai sealed in his armor. Madara was a genius and he had to respect when another shinobi demonstrated a similar level of intellect and ability. His thoughts were disrupted as more attacks were being sent to him by the other two. The kunoiki had opened a scroll that sent a multitude of kunai towards him, explosive seals fluttering behind them. The kunai couldn't pierce his Susanoo nor could the explosions. It was a minor drain on his chakra, but thanks to the senju cells he had no worries of running out of chakra. Chakra surged as a purple Susanoo roared into existence. The young Uchiha had awakened the legendary power of his clan. Again Madara started to see why the Obito brat was so worried. On a single team there seemed to be a Fuinjutsu expert, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki, a genius with a gifted Sharingan and a full-blooded Uchiha with a Mangekyo Sharingan. His heart was beating with elation. No one since Hashirama had ever proved to be a challenge to him. His chakra pulsed with the thought of glorious combat. Blue and purple chakra figures raced toward each other and clashed. Both wielded two blades and all four of them were now locked. Madara grinned wickedly as his superior Susanoo bore down on the younger Uchiha. Naruto's chakra network was rebelling against him. The seething mass of hatred that welled from the Kyuubi meant that any type of ninjutsu, or even sustained movement, was impossible. Gritting his teeth he forced himself to look inwardly and try to talk with the damned Barker fox. The battlefield disappeared and he was in front of a massive gate. The nine-tailed fox was thrashing, clawing and biting at the seal. It wasn't able to break it, but the chakra wasn't fully contained. Stop it, the fox roared. It will enslave me again, I must kill him. Madara must die. I'm with you on that, now calm down so I can actually fight. The fox roared and thrashed again. This is ridiculous, he can't seem to see any reason. It's never been like this before. When I've used his chakra I've always had to fight, but my will has always won out. Now he's driving himself crazy fighting against me. Naruto was troubled. He knew that outside they were somehow facing one of the legendary founders of the Konohagakure. Naruto, thanks to his clones, had read almost every piece of shinobi history that could be found, along with pretty much everything that was written he could get his hands on. Kakashi always said knowledge was power and time was never an issue when he had Kage Bunshin. This was the man who had nearly defeated the Shodai, the original Kami no Shinobi. His team would likely need him. He had faith in their abilities, but this was on a different level. Looking at the Kyuubi he was faced with some bad options. He could try to pass through the seal and kick the damned fox's ass and cow him into submission, which considering he was the strongest of the Biju didn't seem to be a brilliant idea. He could try to use his knowledge of Fuinjutsu to alter the seal. Also not a wonderful idea considering these kinds of seals were immensely complicated and he wouldn't want to ruin his dad's work. Fighting like this was useless. He had those two options, or he could allow the Kyuubi's chakra to fill him and let the fox out, so to speak. Naruto was confident he could wrangle control of his chakra back to a stalemate if it turned on his allies. It was a desperate choice, but with his other two options so bleak it was the best he had. Naruto closed his eyes and in the real world Naruto's eyes opened into a fiery red. 5 tails sprouted and sickening dark red and black chakra cloaked him head to toe. Madara. The Kyuubi roared in absolute rage and charged the Susanoo currently pressing down on the younger Uchiha. As Sasuke and Madara battled with their monstrous chakra constructs, Kakashi looked worriedly toward Naruto. What was going on? He could tell his chakra was surging in a crazed fashion. Suddenly Naruto grew still and his Fuinjutsu suit ripped to shreds as demonic chakra coated him completely. This was not like previous times he used the Kyuubi's chakra. The thick chakra felt heavy in the air, smothering everything with a wave of killing intent. Madara. And that was not his voice. The transformed Naruto blazed forward and slammed into the foot of Madara's Susanoo. Chunks of blue chakra were torn away as it slashed and ripped into it. It didn't attack with any hint of strategy, just raw bloodlust. Kakashi released the Hachiman, conserving his energy. His time to strike would come later, but for now he could continue to help grind down the resurrected Uchiha. He knew from talking to Sasuke about his Susanoo that the power was a tremendous drain on one's chakra reserves. With all of the water still pouring down in the downpour, he used another powerful Suten jutsu. The conservation of chakra was his primary concern. Any element could hurt a Susanoo if the attack was powerful enough. A massive tide of water formed as he completed Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu, water release, great waterfall technique. The water formed a concussive wave that could destroy buildings and create craters. It slammed into Madara's Susanoo and dented it. I was hoping for more. The Susanoo reformed quickly enough and Kakashi could see no weakening of Madara's chakra levels. Naruto dodged the Susanoo's foot as it tried to kick him away. The beast-like movements had Naruto fighting on all fours more often than on both feet. It was unsightly to Kakashi's eye. Sakura had not been idle either. She had placed a number of her kunai around the battlefield ready to form barriers at the right moment. In addition, she had peppered the backside of the Susanoo with more explosive tags, acid bombs and superheated steam. It also tore chunks from the Susanoo, but like the damage he and Naruto had done, it was being regenerated without any dip in Madara's chakra reserves. Madara's voice boomed from the Susanoo. Do you think you can wear me down? I applaud your efforts, you have done better than I expected, but I am more than just the Madara Uchiha of your legends. I have my old rival's cells in my body. Give up. Kakashi's thoughts raced. If he really had Senju genetics in his body, that meant it would be incredibly difficult to drain him of chakra. Tsunade was a chakra monster and she was the Shodai's granddaughter. And before Yamato's death he had a reputation for being the Anbu operative with the most stamina. On the upside, he was glad that for all the Uchiha's genius and clear marital abilities, he was also a complete moron. What kind of shinobi gave away valuable information to the enemy? Naruto was now climbing up the Susanoo. Sasuke had stumbled and his Susanoo had fallen to one knee. Tearing, slashing and cutting at the chest of the Susanoo, Naruto was trying to dig his way into Madara's human form. Beast, you'll be under my sway soon enough. Another tail sprang free as the Kyuubi-laced chakra continued to pound at the Susanoo. Madara smirked and one of his blades disappeared. The Susanoo hand grabbed the writhing beast and threw it off the building. Kakashi saw the chakra of Sakura's genjutsu right as it struck Madara. Normally using genjutsu against a Uchiha was a fool's game, but this one might just do the trick. Kokuangyo no Jutsu, Infinite Darkness Technique, was a genjutsu that directly assaulted the eyes. It made no effort to trick its opponent and make them think what was happening was real, it just completely blanked out the vision. Madara laughed it off. Tobirama Barker and his Uchiha killer genjutsu. I hadn't thought to taste it again. Sakura fell backwards in shock. Not only did Madara shatter the genjutsu, he had also reflected it right back onto her. She couldn't see at all. Sasuke was also moving. He used both blades versus the one and shoved Madara's Susanoo up and back. His construct stood up and the blades attempted to skewer Madara. Madara parried and blocked and re-established the sword in the hand he had used to throw Naruto. Instead of a match of brute strength, Sasuke was attempting to out-kenjutsu his opponent. Kakashi used another Suten, Daibakufu no Jutsu, water release, great waterfall technique, to push one of the arms out of the way, allowing Sasuke a chance to drive his sword through the Susanoo. Sadly, it wasn't enough. While the Susanoo was pierced, Madara was able to easily move away from within his chakra construct. While Madara was doing so, Kakashi darted next to Sakura and pushed his chakra through her network in order to flush out the reverse genjutsu. She nodded in thanks. Madara placed himself back in the center of the Susanoo and began another furious exchange with Sasuke. Sakura considered her inventory desperately. Naruto seemed barely in control. Sasuke must be nearing critical chakra levels and nothing she and Sensei were doing was making a lasting dent. And right now she wasn't coming up with any solutions. Break. Alright, enough of this. Naruto thought. Madara had just thrown him off the damned building. With the chakra cloak, the fall hadn't done lasting damage, but he was also not accomplishing much. He forcibly attempted to take control and the Kyuubi fought him tooth and nail. Naruto found himself once again within his own mind before the massive seal and cage that held the nine-tailed fox. Stop it. Do you want to be enslaved again? The Kyuubi roared. Of course not, you ignorant monkey. Stop resisting and let me finish him. Naruto shook his head. You may have power, but you're terrible at using it. You fight purely out of emotion and instinct. No shinobi has ever fought at their best in those conditions. How about you stop fighting me so we can win? The fox roared back at him, but Naruto was pleased to see a bit of uncertainty in his demonic eyes. You know I'm right. Quite interfering and let me work with my team. We are much stronger when we fight together. Our individual skill sets complement each other. You can't synergize with them, all you are doing is blindly attacking. You dare presume to lecture me? The greatest of the Biju. You are nothing but an ant before me. Naruto laughed. An ant. All of the Biju are being rounded up by these Akatsuki people. I'm the only chance you have. I'll say it again. Anger is useless in a fight. No one has ever reached a breaking point and suddenly become a far more skilled fighter. Anger makes one more susceptible to genjutsu, the opponent's tricks. It creates situations where you overpower your jutsu at the cost of your stamina and makes you miss openings. Take a backseat. I've sparred against someone with an Sharingan my entire shinobi career. I can do this. The most powerful of the Biju wanted to roar and rage at its jailer, but he wasn't stupid. The seal was too powerful to allow him to break free. His continued defiance would only hamper Naruto's chances at winning. As much as he hated Naruto and Konohagakure, he hated Madara far more. Never before had his will been taken from him, his very thoughts. To have it happen again would be intolerable. With ill grace he growled. Go then. Naruto smiled as he reoriented to reality. He tugged on the fox's chakra and was pleased to note that it didn't require the normal fight to wrangle it away without losing his focus. Kuchio's no jutsu. Summoning technique. Fukasaku and Shima, the two great toad sages, popped into existence. Naruto quickly explained they were fighting the supposedly dead Madara Uchiha. This is going to be difficult. I'm going to need your help. I know you can't channel nature energy for me, but having additional jutsu against this guy is going to be important. Fukasaku nodded. Of course, young Naruto, we will help you. Shima nodded her assent as well. Naruto smiled at his allies and pulled on more of the fox's chakra. Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Multiple shadow clone technique. Hundreds of nearly naked Naruto clones appeared. Naruto scowled. The Baka fox's chakra had burned away almost his entire Fuinjutsu suit. He didn't have time to dwell on that sort of embarrassment as his shadow clones began swarming up the building to get at Madara. He wasn't far behind them. Once he scaled the heights and got to the platform, he would bring the hammer down. Both metaphorically and literally with his futon, Sora Tonkachi, wind release, sky hammer. Then he would pop his last Senjutsu clone and enter into Sage mode, likely the final time in the fight. The building shuddered and Naruto had to marvel at the architecture. Somehow the building was still standing despite two massive Susanoo chakra constructs battling it out. He wondered if it would still be standing by the end of the fight. Asterisk break. Fuyu crept through the home as silent as death itself. Her blades were drawn, ready to kill the woman who had destroyed her family. It took considerable effort to still the sense of elation that threatened her composure. Her hate, her training and her rage had all been building up to this one moment. Anko Mitarashi lay sleeping in bed. She's gone soft. Pregnancy has domesticated her. Fuyu had no desire to have a fair fight with Anko. That was for children's stories. Shinobi cared about the mission. Dead was dead, whether it was through poison or direct conflict. But she did want Anko to know who killed her. She also wanted the snake summoner to sound the alarm, to create the distraction that would allow the rest of her team to take out their own targets. Most of all, she wanted to look into her eyes and see suffering. And the best way to do that would be to ram her blade through her belly. The attack wasn't likely to kill her, but it would be horrifying for the expecting mother. It would also make her weak and easy to kill. No doubt she would struggle and summon one of her massive snakes, but Fuyu was prepared. The kinjutsu she had learned would allow her to deal with that and finish Mitarashi off. She licked her lips in anticipation. This was it. This was where her brother would be avenged. With no further delay, she moved lightly next to the sleeping woman and drove her tanto right through her stomach. Asterisk break asterisk. The Naruto clones stormed up the building and charged Madara. Their blades cut into the Susanoo with speed and precision. Naruto's base form was faster and stronger than anyone else on his team. The incredible regenerative power of both the Kyuubi and his Uzumaki heritage had allowed him to grow in strength and speed at an immense rate. His muscles would heal from a brutal training regime within hours. What would take Rock Lee a year, he could do in a month. And Cage Bunshin retained all of that strength and that speed. It was one of the reasons Cage Bunshin were more deadly than Mizu Bunshin. The cost, of course, was the division of chakra and that even the slightest wound would dissipate them. But for one whom the Kyuubi was actually allowing its chakra to flow without difficulty, that simply wasn't an issue. The clones charged and cut through the blue chakra construct with pure power. The Susanoo was being subjected to hundreds of cuts a second. They swarmed over it, slashing and stabbing. Others send futon-powered ninjutsu into various parts of the body. Madara began feeling the strain on even his immense reserves and chakra regenerative ability. He was the most powerful Uchiha of all time. And then he had taken on his childhood rival's genetic code that made him even more powerful in the chakra regeneration arena. More importantly was that through the combination of Hashirama's genes he had awoken the Rinnegan, which gave a massive boost of chakra all on its own. But even he could not keep up Susanoo's form under such an assault. It was not like the other members of the team were idle either. Kakashi continued using Suten Jutsu in conjunction with Sasuke's own Susanoo. Sakura continued her non-stop rain of explosions. Madara had never thought he would see the day when his perfect Susanoo would not be enough to defeat an enemy. He saw Obito and Zetsu ready themselves to enter into the fray, and he held up his hand holding them back. He sensed chakra gather above him, air folded on top of air. In another second or two he knew it would come screaming down atop his ravaged Susanoo. Do you think this is the extent of my power? You mock me. Madara rose to the top of his Susanoo and activated his Rinnegan-based powers. As the futon, Sora Tonkachi, wind release, Sky Hammer, screamed down, he absorbed it completely. Several clones rose up to strike him, but as quick and as powerful as they were, he was better. He swept his gun by in an arc, popping two clones. He ducked a slash and a kick took another. His Sharingan whirled and anticipated each and every one of the clones' moves. The clones were expendable, however, and his Susanoo was still being ripped to shreds. Madara decided to thin out the clone swarm with Kaiten, Goku Meshitsu, Fire Release, Great Fire Destruction. The massive firestorm which erupted from Madara's mouth instantly burned hundreds of clones. Kakashi moved behind a piece of debris, and even with his fire-repellent Fuinjutsu suit he felt the heat. Sakura activated one of the barrier Fuinjutsu that she had scattered on the ground to shield herself. Naruto knew it was coming thanks to the information from his clones and had clung to the wall below the clearing before pulling up to see the devastation. Sasuke's Susanoo was still on fire and Sasuke released it and fell to the ground panting. Every cell in his body ached from trying to keep up the ultimate technique of the Sharingan. As Madara grinned at the destruction, he sensed the chakra in Sasuke's eyes activate. Amaterasu, the black flame of the Sharingan activated, and Madara was the target. With his Sharingan, however, he had detected the buildup of chakra and had already used Bansho Tenon, Universal Pull, to lift some of the scorched rock and intercept the black flames. Using the Rinnegan's power of attraction and repulsion, he hurled the burning rock back down at the thoroughly drained Sasuke. The rock disappeared as Kakashi used Kamui. Madara released his own Susanoo and landed on the ground. Amusing but futile. All of your little tricks cannot match my power. Naruto flipped over onto the top of the building in sage mode. The two toads were resting on his shoulders, ready to lend their aid. His blade was drawn and futon energy was coursing through it. He shifted his grip and charged Madara. Break. At first Anko thought it was a trick. A skilled scout like Fuyu falling for a genjutsu. They were trained to avoid genjutsu traps and to always be observant of their surroundings. But nonetheless the Kumo Kunoiki had thoroughly been convinced by the illusion. Anko had felt pulse-pounding terror when she realized her home was being infiltrated. It was a fear she hadn't known in some time. She knew it was because of the life she carried within her and that she now had something to lose. But despite her condition, she had kept her skills sharp. So when she realized someone was in her home, she quickly hid and waited. When the form of Fuyu entered, she put up a genjutsu in the hopes that it would give her time to flee, but to her shock her would-be killer hadn't dispelled it. In fact, she seemed completely enraptured by it. Fuyu stabbed into the empty bedding and never felt the kunai that pierced her temple. Fuyu had entered Anko's home not as a cold-blooded shinobi undertaking a vital mission for her village. She had entered with anger, hatred and a lust for revenge. Those emotions had distracted her and led her to believe the illusion because she wanted to believe the illusion. The pregnant Kunoichi let out a breath of relief. She needed to let the village know that the enemy had breached the security of the village. The timing of the attack, coinciding with the assassination of the fire daimyo, could not be coincidence. She would need to warn the Hokage. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.